All right, I'm looking at these artist panels. I got a few from Legion, and they are pre-mounted on aluminum. And so they're essentially ready for framing right now. They don't really need anything else. They're ready to go. So I want to try them with you. I really like Legion's paper. The Aqua Cold Press is one of my favorite go-tos that I use for so much. It's also at a price point that I like, so it's not totally break the bank. Okay, so already, take this off. I'm not great at taking stickers off and not leaving residue, but this will come off. Do that later. So yeah, these are definitely pre-mounted. It's approximately, I mean, it feels like about 5 sheets of what we would normally use with watercolor, so it's definitely hardy. So I'm just going to do some simple roses, and we'll walk through the process as well, because why not? So I want to look at roses a few different ways. The first way is probably the most difficult for people to get a hang of, but once you get a hang of it, it is so easy to do. And that is by creating tight C-curves or horseshoes or just like lines with the very tip of our brush. We have to think about water control. So that's going to be making sure we're not flooding our brushes with water. And I will start with a lighter color. I like doing these light colors. I think those are really pretty. And I'm just going to start off somewhat off center here. So I will, just with the tip of my brush, you can see I'm barely applying pressure. I'm just creating these little C-curves. I have plenty of paint on my brush, not a ton of water, but enough to where, we're working. Okay, I'm going to do these enough to bring in that solid core. From here, I will rinse my brush. So just quickly drag it on the side. I still have pigment on my brush, not as much, and I'm going to create a C-curve just next to that. Okay, it doesn't matter if it's wonky or, not perfectly shaped. I'm going to do that again here, and I'm going to keep some white space. I want to keep white space in between. So I'm thinking about that while using my round brush to my advantage. So I'm pressing down full pressure and then lifting up into that light pressure. Okay, so I basically just surrounded doing that. I wasn't trying to go the same direction because we don't want to make a pinwheel, or is that what it is? So we want this to look more organic. So I rinse my brush again the same way I did the first time. I'm going to continue doing that. So what's happening is I'm pulling pigment from the previous strokes into these strokes. So I'm pulling some of it, keeping white space while doing this. So pulling in some white space in between petals and then lifting up. If we don't have as much pigment anymore, we can always go in, and I would say start in the middle. Add to the middle, and then if you need to move outward, you can. But we want to start in the middle because that's where this color is being pulled from. We don't want this to be all over. We want the core to be what is really highly pigmented. So if we need to pick some of that up and dab it over, that would be better than going in straight with straight pigment and setting it down. So basically grabbing some of that and tapping it in and bringing it through. But it just depends on the pigment you're using, because some will spread quite easily while others will be a little more difficult. But I actually really like when there's a lot more transparency to these roses because it creates more of that loose effect. While it's still wet, I want to add some leaves, and I'm going to do this with just a real deep color because I'm feeling the contrast today. And I'm just going to pull a stem with the very tip of my brush into the rose. I'm a little shaky on that one. So I'll do the same thing here, just a few. And I'm not going to start doing a ton of leaves right now. I just wanted to get that connection so that we have some bleed. We'll see how that ends up later. But right now, that's all I was doing. I just wanted to have a little bit of that bleed for interest. And as it starts to dry, you'll see that spread even more. But that's just like an added little bonus if you want to bring that those colors together to have that looser effect. Okay, so this is one way to do the rose. Now the next one I want to do is going to be the same idea, but more facing toward its side. I'll grab that beigey color, and I have mostly paint versus water. I don't have enough water on here to where it's going to pool on my paper though. And I'll start off doing these same marks, but I'm going to do them instead of more round like this, I'm going to bring them up into more of this oval shape. So longer strokes, less height. So that's about right. Make sure there's plenty of pigment in the center. Okay, so I rinsed my brush. It's got too much water on it right now. If it's easier for you, if you just dab the side, like the belly of the brush on a paper towel, it will soak up that excess water much easier. Okay, so from here, I'm going to do a C curve on the side of that. It's gonna touch on the side. This is drying a little too fast, so I'm gonna work it a little bit, but I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side where I drag a C curve in, and ideally that would bleed. Again, I let it dry too much before I went in, but then I'll do the same thing kind of at the bottom. And so I'm just creating more of this general shape of curves underneath, and then I can pop a little pigment toward the bottom just to give a little bit of definition. And then at the top, I'm actually going to do a C curve coming from the top, but it's going to be thinner and shorter, a few of those. And then from here, just a few textured, well, it's going to look textured because just with the tip of my brush, I'm coming in and doing very fine curved lines. Then I can do one final one right here. So that makes it look like it's more on its side. It looks a little fluffier. And you can also have it start to open up by doing a C curve downward like this and opening around the edges. So C curve, C curve, C curve, C curve, and then C curve, C curve, and then we can go in and add some pigment to the bottom of that so that those petals are more assumed as well. Again, it's really light. That's part of it though. That's part of the aesthetic of having these opening blooms, and roses are best done when they have that transparency. Now, because I want to add that depth in, you might hate this idea, but I'm still going for it. I'll make sure that I have less water on my brush. I want a real fine line. It's just going to touch the area that's going to bleed. I just love the way that it looks. So again, I'll add to these after, but right now I just want to put in that initial connection. And I'm going to do one more because I like the rule of thirds when it comes to flowers. And I'll do kind of a combination of the two for this last one. And I'll bring in the peachy tone a little more, but I want to make sure I have plenty of pigment that will spread into the rest of it. So I'll start off here. And if this is wet and you go into that, that's actually more fun. So if we can work a little faster. Okay, so I just did some dots this time, and then I'll do a few thin lines around that. I'll rinse my brush, come through and do a C curve here. I'll do a C curve here. I'm not doing full pressure just yet. The other thing I want to point out is, do you see how that's not connecting to anything? We want that to connect. We want this to connect. That's going to be what pulls the pigment. We don't want all of these open lines, even though that's the stroke we're making. So some of this will connect and some of it will just be open like that. So we have both of those going on, and that's creating that texture and also the loose feeling. So we can keep this open here, but then pull in and just kind of overlap. And really, it's all quite intuitive once you do it a few times, and it just loosens up even more. So the right way to do it is really just to let go of caring so much about what the end result is going to be, because it does organically form. Like this example here has too much white space, but it is in a balance. It looks good. Like I don't want to change that in theory too much, but actually end up liking it. Okay, same thing here where I'm just gonna pull in some little stems that can bleed into this a little more. I'll bring some in right here with the tip of my brush just for that fun interest. And then just for fun, I'll put in a little here and I'll figure out what to do with that in a bit. But overall, it's allowing that bleed to happen. Kind of cheating, but that's okay. Okay, so from here, that's when we can add the leaves because I'm happy with these roses. So for these leaves, what I want to do, we can do these long, pretty stems, but I think it might be fun to add more texture. So for these, I'm using less pressure on my brush than I normally would, and I'm just kind of feathering. See how I'm using the tip of my brush to create this texture. And then we can put even some assumed texture in here that isn't connected to any of these stems. And it creates more of this organic form, which I think is really pretty with leaves, especially when it's dark like this. The contrast really brings it to life. This is a little dark, so I'm not gonna do it too big, but I'm not quite ready to rinse the brush because I think that some of this dark color would be really pretty, especially when it's next to some that's a little lighter. Okay, so now I'll rinse so I have less paint and finish that off. And then this bled quite a bit, so it's almost looking like that is part of like the leaf form, so I don't want that. So one of the ways that we can lift that up is to clean our brush completely, blot it on a paper towel, and then bring some of this color up. It doesn't look like it's coming up, but it is. We're gonna blot it again and bring that color up. Then we have that bleed that we wanted, but it's not so intense. You can actually take watercolor up with this effect as well. You just continue going over it. And then it will eventually, but I do want that there, so I'm just smoothing that out a little so it doesn't get confusing and make it seem like that's a leaf. Okay, so then from here, I'll continue to drag some of these out. And add a little more depth to this. And then from here, I could do some longer ones that kind of end up filling the empty spaces. So when we're working on something like this that does have all this space to fill, we want to make sure that we do. So filler flowers could be really pretty for this. I'm going to grab an orangey color, but I'm going to make it quite a bit darker because I want it to be more muted. So I can do that by grabbing an orange, and a complementary color like a purple would be good because then that's going to counter and create more of a muted tone. I just need to grab enough of it. There we go. So see how that mutes it quite a bit without taking away the lightness of it. And so I can do little flowers on their side. I want to make them smaller because I want the roses to be the focal point. I'll do some right here. So just C curve, and then I have that base part, and I'll add the center of those to make them come to life a little more. I'll do C curve for the base. So I'm doing this kind of upside down, and then petal, petal, petal. I leave some white space. So these are just those loose flowers. And I like the balance here, so I think I'm gonna leave it at that. While it's still wet, I can go in and drop some pigment in the middle so that it has that depth that separates the foreground from the background. And I'm choosing red because I think that that would create some interest for a pop of color. I think it's fun. And then from here, I can do those longer leaves that are a lot more translucent and just add depth. I'll do some peekabooing, so they're going to be from behind, and I want to be careful doing that because I don't want to smear any of this and water can reactivate on the paper. So I think what I'll do, and I want these to be, I want them to have a green tone, but I want them to be really, really light, almost beige-ish. So I'm just going to go in, and I have this beige color here that I already had on my palette, but I'm actually pulling in some of the green that I already had here, and see how that's just like muting it. We'll see. We'll see how that works. This is how I mix color though. Okay, so I'll pull, let's see, we have to determine where we want these leaves to be. So I think here would be good, and here would be good, and maybe some here. But I want to keep it balanced to where it has movement and not being so three-dimensional. So this direction here, I have to turn my paper to make this easier for myself though. And then, so it's coming down like this. Okay, I need a little more green. So what I'll do is actually just pull from any green right here and pull it into the beige. Okay, so a little more green. And then this nice flowing shape. So full pressure into light pressure. I want these to be a little longer. There. Okay, and then same thing here, I'll have that come off. Full pressure into light pressure. And then right here would be good. And I'll have this one just be barely a stem. And then mostly we're having just these peekaboos coming from behind rather than them being like super leggy. Turn that around, see how that looks. Okay, so that filled a lot of that space, and the color is really pretty. So I'm happy with that. And then I'll do the same thing here, but also change the direction just a little bit so that it's flowing out. Now I could put some color in here, and all that needs to be is just some mark making like that, and that's gonna fill that area. And then we'll do the same thing here and here, and then maybe just do a tiny peekaboo here so it doesn't seem like nothing's going on. So just a little bit, and then come up here. Okay, love that. A little too much water. I'm gonna just dab my brush on a paper towel and lift some of that back up so it's not super pooly. I do like a little bit of that variation, but I don't want it to be a sopping mess. Okay, a little more green because we're running out of that. Okay, there we go on the side. And then I don't want it to be this perfect angle, so I'll come over here and fill that in. I actually don't think I need much over here because I like the way that the green is balancing already. I think this turned out really pretty. I'm kind of obsessed with this. I've not done these colors together before, and I really, really like it a lot. Because this is kind of a standalone, this feels a little heavy, so I am going to lift some of this up as much as I don't want to because I love the bleed. I just don't want to balance it out with anything else. Like I don't want to balance it out with additional leaves, and so I'm just going to work this out first. I'm going to get that nice and wet and then lift some of this up. There. Okay, I like that a lot better. It's just softer. I don't mind these hard blooms if there's other things to balance it. Now, the last thing that I would do is add some like fluffy filler, and you can do that with a pop of color, like orange would be cool. I've already used orange, so maybe I'll do a lighter purple just to be not detract, but to still complement what I have going on here. And I'm not going to do this in very many places at all. So I'm just going to kind of dab right here, a few little dots. I'll do it, let's see, right here. And I'll do it here. And those three areas look good. And then the rest, I'm just going to a little bit here and there, but that's it. I don't want to overdo this. I say that's it and then I add. But I don't want to overdo it because that's just like texture to be added. I will put some in the center somewhere just so it doesn't feel like it's only on the edges. But then that's it. When that dries, it's going to be really subtle. You almost won't even see it. It's just a way to bring that to life. So I love the way this turned out. I hope that this one was fun for you too. I really love the way that this feels to use. The paper responds just the way that I would expect Legion paper to turn out. It's always one of my go-tos, and so I am pretty happy with this, I must say. I can't wait to display this or gift it, because what an awesome situation.